For 42 years, Harold Finch lived at 1247 Maple Street in the small town of Millbrook. He was the kind of neighbor everyone appreciated but few really knew. A retired postal worker with silver hair always neatly combed, Harold spent his mornings tending to his roses and his afternoons reading on his front porch. Children would wave as they passed on their bicycles, and he would smile and wave back, sometimes offering candy from a bowl he kept by his chair. The mail woman, Sandra, had delivered to his house for 15 years and always found him polite and punctual. He paid his bills on time, kept his lawn pristine, and never caused any trouble. His house was a modest two-story colonial painted pale yellow with white shutters, indistinguishable from dozens of others in the neighborhood except for his remarkable rose garden that won the town competition 3 years running. When Harold collapsed while watering his flowers on a Tuesday morning in September, the whole street felt the loss. Mrs. Chin from next door found him lying peacefully among his prize-winning roses, the garden hose still running, creating small rivers between the flower beds. The paramedics said he died instantly of a heart attack. He was 84. The funeral was well attended for a man who had no family. Neighbors shared memories of his quiet kindness, how he always cleared snow from elderly Mrs. Patterson's walkway without being asked, how he had helped the Johnson family search for their lost cat, how he never complained when teenagers played music too loud at night. Harold's will left his house to the town with instructions to sell it and donate the proceeds to the local library. The task of clearing out his belongings fell to the town administrator, Rebecca Walsh, and a crew of volunteers. They expected a straightforward job. An elderly man living alone probably didn't accumulate much. Rebecca arrived on a crisp October morning with 3 volunteers, Tom Morrison, the high school principal, Sarah Kim, a real estate agent, and Frank DeLuca, who ran the local hardware store. They began methodically in the living room, boxing up books, dishes, and the simple furnishings of a man who lived modestly. The house seemed to reflect Harold perfectly, everything clean and organized, nothing excessive or unusual. His bedroom contained a single bed, a reading chair, and a dresser with a few photographs of places that might have been vacation destinations. The kitchen was sparse but functional. The basement held standard items, holiday decorations, old tools, boxes of records and tax documents dating back decades. It was Frank who noticed something odd about the basement wall while they were moving Harold's workbench. Behind where the bench had stood for who knows how many years, the wall looked different. The paneling didn't match the rest of the basement, and there appeared to be a barely visible seam running vertically along one section. Frank called the others down and pointed out the inconsistency. Tom ran his hand along the seam and realized it wasn't painted over like the rest of the wall. Sarah noticed that this section of wall sounded hollow when tapped, while the rest sounded solid. Rebecca felt around the edges of the panel and discovered it was actually a hidden door, held in place by small magnetic latches that released when pressed. Behind it was a space about 6 feet wide and 8 feet deep that had been carefully carved out of the area behind the stairs. The hidden room was lined with cork boards covering every wall from floor to ceiling. Pinned to these boards were hundreds of newspaper clippings, all yellowed with age, all featuring the same type of story, missing persons reports from towns within a 300-mile radius, dating back 37 years. But these weren't random clippings. Someone had organized them methodically, with red string connecting different articles, notes written in careful handwriting, and photographs, not of people, but of locations. Remote hiking trails, abandoned buildings, parking lots, rest stops along highways. Each location was marked with detailed observations about traffic patterns, visibility, and access routes. In the center of the room sat an old wooden filing cabinet with 4 drawers. Rebecca opened the top drawer with trembling hands and found it filled with small personal items, each in its own labeled plastic bag, a silver bracelet, a class ring from a high school 3 towns over, a wallet containing an expired driver's license, reading glasses, a watch stopped at 11:47, car keys, a cell phone that looked to be from the early 2000s. The second drawer contained maps, detailed topographical maps of the surrounding counties with specific areas circled in red ink. Handwritten notes in the margins indicated dates and times, weather conditions, and cryptic symbols that seemed to mark specific locations. The third drawer held what appeared to be journals, small notebooks filled with Harold's meticulous handwriting. Rebecca flipped through one and found entries that read like surveillance notes, arrival and departure times for various locations, descriptions of people who visited these places, their routines and habits. The fourth drawer contained photographs, hundreds of them. Not pictures of people being harmed, but surveillance-style photos of individuals at gas stations, restaurants, hiking trails, shopping centers. Many of the faces matched missing person posters Rebecca had seen over the years on community bulletin boards and in post offices. On a small table in the corner sat a radio scanner, the kind used to monitor police frequencies, and a box of cassette tapes, each labeled with dates and locations. A large calendar on the wall showed Harold's activities for what appeared to be his final year, with numerous out-of-town trips marked in different colored inks. Sarah noticed something else that made her stomach turn: a map of their own county pinned to the wall with several locations circled, including the local high school, the shopping mall, and the hiking trail where just last spring a college student named Amanda Morris had disappeared while jogging. Amanda's missing person flyer was pinned directly next to the map. The room also contained a small desk with a typewriter, an old manual model, and boxes of typing paper. In one of the desk drawers, they found what appeared to be practice letters, typed notes that were never sent but seemed designed to throw investigators off trails. Saw her getting into a blue sedan. She mentioned wanting to start over somewhere new, heard she had problems with gambling debts. But perhaps most chilling was a detailed blueprint of the room itself, showing how Harold had carefully planned this hidden space. The blueprint was dated 1987, just 2 years after he moved to Maple Street, suggesting this had been his intention from the very beginning. Rebecca immediately called the police. Within an hour, Detective Maria Santos arrived with a forensics team. Detective Santos had been investigating missing persons cases in the region for 12 years and recognized many of the faces in Harold's collection. The forensics team spent 3 days decommissioning everything in the room. They found no DNA evidence, no weapons, no direct proof that Harold had harmed anyone. But the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. Harold had been systematically tracking people who later disappeared, collecting their personal belongings, and documenting their routines and habits with the precision of someone planning their moves carefully. Computer analysis of the dates in Harold's journals revealed a pattern. Every 6 to 8 months for 37 years, Harold had taken trips that coincided with missing person reports from the areas he visited. He had been methodical, never operating in the same location twice, never following a pattern that would attract attention. The police discovered that Harold had used different aliases when traveling, maintaining several driver's licenses and credit cards under various names. His postal worker job had given him perfect cover. He knew how to navigate the mail system, understood how identification worked, and had access to information about people's travel plans and routines. Detective Santos realized they were looking at potentially one of the most prolific serial killers in the region's history, someone who had operated for nearly 4 decades while maintaining the perfect cover of a harmless elderly neighbor. The number of items in his collection suggested at least 37 victims, possibly more. What made Harold particularly dangerous was his patience and planning. Unlike impulsive killers, he had studied his targets for weeks or months before acting, learning their routines, identifying when they would be most vulnerable, and choosing locations where their disappearances wouldn't immediately raise suspicions. The investigation revealed that Harold had specifically chosen victims who were less likely to be missed quickly: people traveling alone, individuals with few family connections, those who had mentioned to someone they were considering leaving their current situation. His surveillance notes showed he listened to conversations, observed relationships, and selected people whose absence wouldn't immediately trigger intensive searches. The town of Millbrook was devastated by the revelation. People who had known Harold for decades struggled to reconcile the friendly neighbor they remembered with the evidence found in his basement. Parents realized their children had taken candy from a man who may have been responsible for dozens of disappearances. Mrs. Chen, his next-door neighbor, told reporters she felt sick knowing she had lived next to him for 25 years, had invited him to barbecues, had asked him to water her plants when she traveled. She kept thinking about all the times he had been alone in her house, wondering what he might have been planning. The high school principal, Tom Morrison, couldn't stop thinking about the map with the school circled. Had Harold been watching students? Planning something that his death had prevented? The thought kept him awake at night. Detective Santos worked with law enforcement agencies across multiple states to match Harold's travel records with unsolved missing person cases. The investigation ultimately connected him to 43 disappearances spanning from 1987 to 2024, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. But Harold had been too careful. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, investigators found no direct physical evidence linking him to any specific crime. No DNA, no fingerprints at crime scenes, no witnesses who could place him with any victim at the time of their disappearance. His careful planning meant that while everyone knew he was responsible, proving it legally would have been nearly impossible even if he had lived to stand trial. The families of the missing persons found some closure in knowing what had likely happened to their loved ones, but also frustration that Harold would never face justice for his crimes. Some families began searching the areas marked on Harold's maps, hoping to finally locate their missing relatives and bring them home for proper burial. The house at 1247 Maple Street couldn't be sold. Despite the town's attempts to market it after removing all evidence of Harold's activities, no one wanted to live in a place where such evil had been planned. It sits empty now, the rose garden slowly dying, the yellow paint beginning to peel. The hidden room has been sealed, but sometimes neighbors report seeing lights in the basement windows at night, though the electricity was disconnected months ago. Children cross to the other side of the street when walking past, and adults find excuses to take different routes. Detective Santos continues investigating the cold cases connected to Harold, hoping to provide closure to more families. She often thinks about how someone could live such a double life for so long, appearing kind and helpful while secretly planning terrible things. The case changed how she looks at people, making her more cautious about trusting friendly neighbors and helpful strangers. The Harold Finch case became a textbook example for law enforcement training programs, demonstrating how serial killers can hide in plain sight for decades. His methodical approach and careful planning made him nearly impossible to catch, and only his natural death prevented him from continuing his crimes. The people of Millbrook learn that evil doesn't always look like what they expect. Sometimes it looks like a friendly neighbor who waters his roses every morning and waves at children riding their bikes. Sometimes it lives next door for 40 years, helping with snow removal and searching for lost cats, while secretly planning unspeakable things. The case remains open, with investigators still hoping to find evidence that will lead them to the locations where Harold's victims might be buried. Every few months, someone calls in a tip about suspicious activity near one of the areas marked on his maps, but so far, none have led to discoveries. Harold Finch died peacefully among his roses, taking his secrets with him. But his hidden room revealed enough to show that monsters can wear the most ordinary faces, and the most dangerous predators are often those we never suspect.